Here we are. Hey, Ryan, how are you today?
Hey, Amy, I'm great. How are you doing today?
I am happy it's Friday and I'm
Yeah.
happy to be here with you. And I know that a lot of our parents and juniors are eager to hear all of the things. So appreciative. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I think that what we'll do is I'm going to try to capture notes because I know a lot of our viewers will watch this on the replay. But the three things we're going to cover today
Hmm.
are, and I know we've talked about this before, but I think reinforcement for a lot of parents is really helpful right now because there's so much going on in brains. So we're talking about, fast flash for college acceptance, what parents of juniors can do now. And we've picked these three topics. There are at least 23, but we've picked the three of, I've still had a lot of parents. I want to hear what you have to say about optimizing your college applications with number one, teacher recommendations. What is the strategy from you, the college consulting expert's point of view?
Right.
And then number two, maximize your summer, right?
Hmm.
Maximize your summer. What can you do with applications? What can you do with activities? And then number three, we'll touch on just some quick essay tips, being very cognizant of the fact that a lot of our students are, up to here with studying. So we're not going to get into the weeds with it today, but I thought if
Right.
we can, this is just going to be a Friday flash. So let's start off with what are you saying to your students, especially your juniors, when they're thinking of teacher recommendations, right? Like
Right.
timing and what do they say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as you can imagine, we could spend 30 minutes on each one of these topics, right? So we'll just kind of hit the high level when it comes to teacher recommendations and letters of recommendation. So students, parents obviously have lots of questions about letters of recommendation. I mean, who should they ask and why should they ask these particular teachers? And are there any teachers they shouldn't ask? Or is there any
Mm,
subject matters they shouldn't put into their application or have teachers write? Or how many letters of recommendation should we receive? So we could go on and on and on.
right.
But in general, what I've seen this past year is that the number of letters of recommendation that colleges require have gone down dramatically since
Okay,
COVID.
wait. The number of applications that colleges are requiring.
Excuse me, the number of letters of recommendations that the colleges require have gone down dramatically. Thank you
What
for catching
what do
that.
you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you mean that some colleges are saying like we used to want teacher recommendations, but now we don't, or colleges are saying we used to want two and now we want one? Like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, exactly. They used to want three were required and two were optional, or four were required and two were optional. Some now, I mean, some colleges now don't require any letters of
Okay.
recommendation. Some have optional where they're not required, but if you want to send in a few, feel free. And others are like two required and maybe one or two optional. Whereas before it was much, greater numbers in terms of letters of recommendation and who were required to write those letters of recommendation. So colleges were very specific on who they wanted to write the letter of recommendation. And we're still seeing that. So the only way you're going to know this is when you sign into the college's application
Mm,
online, or if you go to the Common App, it's going to show you, which recommendations are required or are
mm,
optional.
mhm.
So I'm telling my students, if you're going to ask your teachers now before summer, which I am suggesting
Okay.
my juniors do, find those teachers, try to find two teachers to ask because that's pretty much the average of what I'm seeing. You might need to get more than that. You might not even need to, but I'd say on average, two is the number you should shoot for if you don't know exactly which colleges you're applying to yet.
Right,
Does that make
right.
sense?
That makes sense, and you answered my question. I was gonna say, well, what if you're, that junior who just doesn't know, they have kind of an idea where they want to apply, but they couldn't tell you, like, and this
Right.
college is requiring. So perhaps a good rule of thumb right now is, okay, I mean, kind of assume you might not, but you're probably gonna need a teacher's letter of recommendation. And
Yeah.
if you did,
Right.
who would that teacher be? And
Right.
once you've identified
Teachers.
that teacher, we'll talk to them now or before the end of the school year. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
I think that's
And
totally
you know this as well as I, being a
yeah,
former teacher,
yeah.
especially if you go to a very large school, public school in general. Um, you know, teachers limit how many letters of recommendation they're going to write. So if there's 400 students, seniors in high school,
Yeah.
you're not going to write 400 letters of recommendation. You might, as a teacher, maybe limit it to 35 or 40 or 20. And so if you're a student and that's your favorite teacher and you did not ask, in advance, you wait till beginning of senior year, you might be too late to get that letter of recommendation from that teacher
Yes.
you really enjoyed.
Okay, so this is such a great point, but I have to say, having been a former teacher, we didn't put I never put a limit on. I
Sure.
wouldn't say like, it's like you come in, well, Ryan, I'm at my max. But I have to say a lot of the students who are hesitant to ask, sometimes those are the best students. And the reason is it's pretty clear, that kid that always had his hand up in class or was chatting with you before or after class. But sometimes it's those students who you just don't know how positively you've affected them. And
Mhm.
they'll say, Miss Haskell, those discussions were hard, but I've never thought critically about how my life connects to the Puritans and American Lit or Holden Caulfield and Ketchum, right? And so I think parents listening now, listening on the replay, to absolutely plant this seed, whether your student is one of those more aggressive, outgoing, kids, to secure that application now, and especially if it might take them a while to really think of, a great teacher that could help really amplify their application. So that's great advice. So thank you.
Yeah, no, and you made some great points there as well. So telling the teacher why you are asking them
Yeah.
is really, really important.
Yeah.
For me, I have my students actually write that out in a letter,
Yeah.
but somehow letting the teacher know, other than, hey, Miss Haskell, will you write me a letter of recommendation? It's, why are you asking this teacher?
Yeah.
And to your point, as a teacher, you might be going, why in the world is this student asking me for a letter of recommendation? And then when they tell you, you're like, oh, that makes sense now. I didn't know I made that big of an impact.
Yeah.
And they can write about that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm telling you, from a teacher's point of view, I loved this. Like, especially the least suspecting student. Like, really, you didn't do that well in
Right.
English. You told me 10 times how you're a math person and how you don't like to read or write, and you want me to write a letter. And then the stories they had; those are the best.
Right.
So, okay. Fabulous. Now here's my burning question for you today for our Friday flash.
Mhm.
So, what can especially juniors do this summer? And this is twofold. So, of course, to get organized with their applications, right?
Right.
But also any other activities or meaningful experiences that they can hone in on and add, like crunch. I mean,
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is kind of like a softball question to me, and I'm just going to hit it right back over to you, Amy. I would
okay,
say write those essays, get started writing those essays. That would be one thing that they can go ahead and get done because, as you know, this is the most time consuming part of the application. And if you can do it over the summer when you're not working on your classes or APs or extracurricular activities or sports, and you have more time to do these, the summer is the time to write those essays.
okay, but okay, so two things. So first of all, I was going to ask you, but what about like I had a parent and a student this week, kind of doing like a pre-strategy session,
Sure.
and they said, well, we want to be done with all of our essays by August 1st,
Mm,
and this is the first time they're going through college applications, but a lot of the colleges are not releasing
right.
those supplemental essays until like mid-August in some
Exactly.
cases. So that
Right.
well, I know for sure, like, to knock off your common app essay, but
Yeah.
what about a student who's really stumped with the topic? And maybe by doing something else over the summer, the skies would open up and they would
Mm,
have ideas. I mean, for their essay and even to amp up like their activities list. Like, is there
sure.
any like what if you had just like this great student who's like, you know what, Mr. Clark, like I have really good grades, my test scores are decent. I know I'm gonna have a good teacher rec. Um, I'm not scared of the supplemental essays.
Yeah.
Just I just wish there was something else I could do this summer. Like I want to major in, and I'm just making this up, science. I've had a couple of jobs, but what could I do, Mr. Clark, to really amp
Mm,
up, my college resume this summer, right? Like, what
Sure.
would you say? Is there any strategy from a college consultant's point of view? Like,
Definitely, definitely. So I think it depends upon the student.
okay,
Because what I've seen over the years and doing this for almost 20 years is that if you tell a student, say, hey, I want you to go volunteer, and I found this volunteer activity at a local hospital, and they're just not into that, right? It's going to feel like work. They're not going to put their heart into it. It's just, they're just doing it to be doing it, right? And they're doing it to try to build up a resume, but I don't think it's going to really help them at all.
right.
So the first thing is trying to figure out what they're interested in, what excites them, but find something that doesn't seem like work. If
Yeah.
it is volunteering or if it is work,
Yeah.
something that they think will help them kind of figure out what they want to study in college, or something they might find interesting, or something
Right.
different, or just
Right.
something that's fun,
Right.
right? And that could be anything. I mean, that could actually be work. You could go work for, a company or an organization, start your own business.
Right.
It could be volunteering. It could be helping
Right.
coaching a youth league.
Right. Right.
Gosh, I've had so many. I had a student start a website, a blogging website.
Right. Right.
You name it. I mean, I guess the key is finding out what they're excited about and going deep into that subject if you can.
Yeah.
We call it the 3D approach.
Okay.
And you demonstrate, you're donating your time, right? And then you're showing leadership and so on and so forth. So figuring out what that is, that's the key. Because all these activities, the colleges don't weigh one more than the other, right?
Right.
They don't put, working over volunteering or volunteering over sports. I mean, they're all kind of the same,
Right.
It's just, all right, what did you do?
Yeah.
And did you make a difference?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so what is that for your son and daughter? What is that for my son and daughter?
Right.
What excites them? Is it volunteering at the local dance team that she's at to help teach these kindergartners how to dance?
Right.
You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to do that, but my daughter would love to do that. Right?
Can see you volunteering at the local kindergarten dance. Wait, Ryan, did you call the 3D approach?
Yes.
Okay. And what are those 3Ds?
Yeah, I knew you were going to put me on the spot on that. I kind of forgot. So,
oh, I'm sorry. That's okay. You can come back.
Donate, and I forgot the last D.
That's okay.
Yeah.
You know what? It will actually be great if you wanted to, when I post this, like you can just add to the comment.
Yeah, I'll go back there and look at it. I was like, it was right on the top of my head.
Yeah,
I'll probably remember it here in like 10 seconds. And
yeah, for sure. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I think that's wonderful. And I think that here's the thing. It's like,
oh, I know what it is. Do, demonstrate, donate.
Do, demonstrate, and which one?
Donate. Like donate your time, right? Demonstrate your leadership. Do an activity that you enjoy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sorry about that.
Do, demonstrate, and donate. What did you?
In no particular order, right? It can be.
I love that. Okay. Okay. And what I was going to say is, I think that you really hit on something so wonderful in that it's, I guess that's what my mom always said. Like, do what you love and the rewards will be there for you. And so even if a student thinks what they love is like silly, but if they're taking action and they're demonstrating their interest,
right,
and then they're donating their time,
right,
that speaks so highly, and that right there can completely elevate their college application and might spark ideas for the college essays.
Yeah,
So
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. And so the third one
Mhm.
is, of course, we're just going to touch on
Mhm.
the college essays for today, because in talking with students, juniors this week, and parents and neighbors and other teachers, don't you think these juniors are so stressed out right now and just inundated with schoolwork that I don't think I have a lot of eager Beaver students that want to start writing their college essays now. No, there's no point. I mean, if you want to crank out a draft because you think that's fun, and maybe for some people have a nice cup of tea, put their music on, fine, right? I actually gave a workshop this week and every student had a draft. I was so impressed. But what do you do when, and this is the only thing we could talk about unless there's anything else you wanted to add, because I know this is a quick one for college essays. When you do have a really motivated student, but the specific colleges, if they are going to have supplemental essays, have not released those yet, like what might you say to them? Like, and I think would be a good wrap for today.
Well, as you mentioned before, let's start on the ones we know about, which is the Common App essays.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at that. And typically, even the ones that have written their essays, like the students you were just talking about,
Yeah.
because there are a few high schools where they're English teachers, if they're taking English,
Yeah.
that's kind of what they are working on right now.
Right.
And you know as well as I do, sometimes you read those essays and they're just not ready to be submitted, right?
Well, that's a nice way of saying it, Ryan.
Yeah, yeah. So they think they're done, but we know that they're not. And so that's one of the things we can work on to say, hey, we don't know what the supplemental essays are going to be, but let's tweak this a little bit. Let's polish this up a little bit. And for the students that haven't started the Common App essay, let's go ahead and start this process. And I would say, hey, if you want to take a look at last year's essays, I can show you last year's essays for these colleges, and you can kind of take a look and you can kind of write these, but I can't guarantee you
I know
that these are going to be the exact right essays that are going to be
Yeah.
this year if you want to write them.
Yeah. And then here's my final question. Do you recommend when the school year ends that students take a little bit of a break and a breather and then jump into applications with you? Does it just kind of depend on the student, or do you try to have like a structure? Like what is your, and then I'm done with my question.
Yeah, one of my cohorts, my first cohort, we started working about 4 weeks ago with our juniors, right? So we're about 4 weeks into this thing, 4 or 5 weeks into this thing. And I have another cohort that's going to be starting at the end of May, beginning of June. And the idea behind that was to give those students that little break, right? Because they're taking AP tests right now and proms coming up and SATs, ACTs as well. And so, yeah, I mean, I can remember being in their shoes and just being done with school at the end of the year. So, yeah, I think giving them a little breather for a week or two, week and a half, or whatever it is, just to recharge the batteries is probably a good idea.
Right.
When I start my students at the beginning of summer, we aren't doing things. We're not starting out writing the essays right at that moment. You know what I mean? We're kind of easing them into it. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many other strategic steps that I think the essays need to connect to also. So of course, not starting with the essays, I think is beneficial to students in the long run. So awesome. So great. And thank you for joining me. What is the best way for parents to get a hold of you? Or what is easiest? Is it for them to hop on over to your website? And will you tell us what that is again? I'll post it here.
Sure. Thank you. Yes, it's clarkcollegeconsulting.com. And of course, Facebook as well. You can DM me if you want to do it that way, if that's easier for you. But yeah, Clark College Consulting, we have a no-cost consultation.
That's right.
Specifically for, rising seniors. It's a good time to think about that. And I would say as you know, Amy, anyone who's watching this, the college process can be a very burdensome process and a little complicated. And the quicker they get started, the easier it's going to be and the less stressful it's going to be. So this is the time to get started with this stuff.
Yeah, I think it's so true. I mean, I've been doing more traveling lately than I ever have before. And sometimes even packing can be stressful. But the sooner you start, and then if you realize you need something or you need extra help or you need an extra, pair of shoes, you're not stressed. Like, okay, I actually have to do these extra essays or write an extra resume, or it's like, okay, I have the time. And if people are working with you, they have the professional guidance, which takes a lot of pressure off and in the end helps them get into their dream college. So thank you so much. As always, a pleasure.
Yes, always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.